Hello and welcome to the Censored 11 Epilogue, which, I figured to cap off the series since I took a look at the Censored 11, not just with me, but also a few buddies of mine, one of which, well, I don't know if he's my buddy, but anyway, he's the Tooney Tenor, Manny Cruz. Say hi.
Hi, everyone. It's the Tooney Tenor coming at you with some music. Oh, wait. I'm not recording. Not doing, commentary. We're just having a chat.
We're just having a chat. That's right, and less editing for me because I'm sick and tired of editing these Censored 11. You have no idea just how it was a good idea on paper to do them all in a row to get them out of the way, but doing it all in a row, I just feel kind of dirty some of the time because I'm looking at this imagery over and over and over again. But oh my goodness, how do you feel about revisiting some of these Censored 11 shorts?
Well, look at the bright side. I only had to do 3, but I mean, the 3 that I did Hitting the Trail for Hallelujah Land and Sunday Go to Meeting Time and Clean Pastures. And I did listen to the other ones that you've done. But yeah, just being inundated, something like that, whatever that word is. But just
It's a
being
word.
like, it's a word. He card
Words
reads
are good.
There's my first one for the day. But just if it made, I mean, well, I'm gonna go more into it later. But just like from the musical aspect, it was fascinating to listen to, especially with Clean Pastures. Musically, it's just to me, it's really interesting, and also just I love doing this musical research. I'm really getting into musicology, but just the imagery, like if it makes us feel uncomfortable, as I mean, I am a person of color, I'm Hispanic myself, but if it makes me feel uncomfortable and if it makes you as a white man feel uncomfortable, just imagine, how African Americans must feel when they see this type of stuff. And, for those people that have said, oh, it's not that big of a deal, take a joke, blah, 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 blah. It's like, I think you need to rewatch it from another critical lens, just throw your biases to the side and really try to see it as objective as possible and go from there. I don't know if that didn't make any sense, but like I said, if we're uncomfortable, I can only imagine what someone else would feel watching that who actually is black.
Yeah, well, exactly right. And I will be playing a recording from my good friend Huey Nelson, who is African American. He's a huge Looney Tunes fan, and he's been on a few of these videos, especially some of the Censored 11. I took clippings from those videos and put it in because those are long videos, and a lot of us are pretty time poor, so I thought I'd put them in there. But he did record something for me, which I'll play.
My thoughts on the Censored 11, with the exception of All This and Rabbit Stew and Coal Black, I could say those were the only 2 that I actually pretty much enjoyed. Oh, Sunday Go Meeting Time, I didn't really include it because the only good thing about Sunday Go Meeting Time for me was the song at the beginning, which it was pretty catchy. But other than that, I really couldn't sit down and really get into it as much. But compared to what other studios were doing, MGM and Walter Lantz with Scrub Me Mama with a Boogie Beat and Mother Goose Goes South by MGM, the Censored 11 is Oscar worthy compared to what they did. But when you sit down and look at these, you could really see how Hollywood thought of other ethnicities. These were made around the time where anyone who wasn't white, you can pretty much be made fun of, and you really couldn't do anything about it. They did not care about cultural accuracy or cultural sensitivity at the time. I mean, when you're watching some of these, you might question, have these people ever seen a black person before, or have they ever been around a black person? When you watch some of these, the most prominent stereotype that you'll notice is Step and Fetch It and maybe Rochester. That's it. But for the Step and Fetch It, which affects black males, because when you look at the Step and Fetch It, he sounds dumb, can barely speak complete English. He has that accent where he's like, we's going to school, mammy. It sounds like very southern. It has this very post-slavery accent as if he's just now learning some English. I mean, when you look at these, you could pretty much see the stereotypes that Hollywood has. So Warner Brothers was just going based off these stereotypes Black people love gambling, going to church. They like partying. They like singing. They like making music, and basically jumping and jiving. Oh, and they love chicken, but I thought everyone loved chicken. I didn't know it was just regulated to only black people when they use that stereotype. I mean, you could watch Sunday Go Meeting Time, and you could look at someone like Nicodemus and see he's just a ignorant looking black male, goofy looking black male. And then you could look at something like Coal Black and say, oh, this is a beautiful looking black girl, but you can also compare it to Snow White, whereas the hypersexualization of black women, again, how it still plagues them to this day, where you watch it, you can compare it to Snow White, where Snow White is wearing tattered clothes, but you can still see she looks presentable, versus someone like So White from Coal Black, and you can see she's wearing more of a skimpier outfit by the way she looks. And just basically how she does things to get out of certain situations, like saving herself from being kidnapped. She basically gets out of being kidnapped by giving the guys a kiss that tried to kidnap her. And then again, when she's singing to the dwarves, and the dwarves are in the army now, you can see when she says, "I'm walking over khaki now," and she gives them all a kiss. But this is that hypersexualization of black women that I talk about, where people could only see black women as the Jezebel or as someone who's fun in the bedroom, and that's pretty much it. And that can also be harmful because of this. Whereas you could look at something like Red Hot Riding Hood and see Red, this sexy version of Red, and just see her singing the Hey Daddy song, and you could see, okay, people would look at this and say, okay, she's just doing this for money. She's just entertaining the men. But then let's let them swap races, and let's see, like, oh, okay, she's pretty much, people would think, oh yeah, she's a whore. And this pretty much has made like black women the victims of a lot of violence and a lot of like, whereas a lot of black women have been sexually assaulted, but it's always sometimes turned down upon because they think, oh, she was asking for it, versus like said white woman. However, nowadays, Hollywood is now starting to put black women in big and better roles and actually portraying them in a better light nowadays than how they used to. I mean, the only people nowadays that are portraying them in a bad light are pretty much rap music is the only thing putting them in a bad light. Hip hop culture as a whole has always been pretty much the downfall of the black community because of what it promotes and what it does and what it signifies. Pretty much anything it promotes. It promotes basically talking trash about your own women, the killing your own brethren, and basically consumption of a lot of drugs, narcotics, alcohol, which in itself, these studios put these as stereotypes for the black community, such as drinking, gambling, constantly going to church, being highly promiscuous. It's pretty weird how in today's society, hip-hop culture now promotes this type of behavior. The same behavior that people are fighting against is now being romanticized and adding to more negative stereotypes being placed upon us. I think the Censored 11 is a good look and to how studios really thought of black people at the time when these were being created, because now people, you can see what they thought of black people, how they thought of us, and how they portrayed us back then. And I pretty much summed up that how they thought of us is the subservient role, the promiscuous kind, the gambling, drunken, uneducated, and the mammy. That's pretty, and just the servant. Anything of servitude, and pretty much we like making music. That's all you could get from this. The imagery in itself leaves a lot to be desired, because even though their hearts may have been set in the right place to show black people in the theaters and actually include black actors, like for instance, Coal Black, the ignorance was still there because you had the ugly imagery. You still had the imagery that people don't really find attractive about themselves. When I look at this, or let's just say somebody could have a daughter or a son and they look at this, they might look at this and say, oh, am I ugly? How they might look at me. Like, for instance, Elmer Fudd doesn't look as goofy as the hunter from Aldous and Rabbit Stew. He looks somewhat human. The hunter from Aldous and Rabbit Stew looks extremely goofy. He doesn't really look as if he's a person. Even when you look at the natives from the Isle of Pingo Pongo, you can clearly see they don't even look human half the time. A lot of people don't realize that imagery is very powerful and art can really move people. You can actually influence people with just music and art alone. It's kind of like that episode of SpongeBob where SpongeBob was telling bad jokes, and then he wasn't landing an audience any laughter. So he decided to, okay, I'm gonna tell squirrel jokes. He starts making fun of Sandy, and then he tells Sandy about how we all need to laugh at ourselves because he doesn't think much of it, because he even tells Sandy, like, all right, everything's gonna be okay. Nobody thinks you're dumb. But then the next day, everyone, while she's just going shopping in Bikini Bottom, everyone's calling her stupid, or basically basing what SpongeBob said in these jokes, and they're basing it to her now. So now they're treating her differently, stereotyping her. And then the next day, she goes to confront SpongeBob about it again, and he thinks that they're just fooling. So now SpongeBob has a choice. Okay, he can either tell the squirrel jokes and continue to have the audience love him, or Sandy's friendship. But you already know he chooses the squirrel jokes. So Sandy ends up teaching him a lesson the next day by actually playing into his stereotypes, such as actually being stupid and then forgetting that he needs water to actually breathe under there. So she gives him water and fills him, and just puts the hose in his mouth and just continuously fills it up with water to the point even he says he's had enough. But now he fully understands why he needs to stop with the squirrel jokes. He continues the squirrel jokes, but this time he includes everyone now. Like, he makes fun of everyone in Bikini Bottom. So now it balances it all out. So now everyone can laugh at each other and won't just be laughing at Sandy. But here, this is how I see that art can really influence how people feel about you. So when you see cartoons like the Censored 11, you're seeing how people felt about us back in the day. So to really hide these cartoons and act as if they never existed is pretty much covering it up and actually saying that, oh yeah, this never happened. This is where art can also reflect society. Art and music can reflect society as well. So it may be uncomfortable to sit and watch the Censored 11. You have to see this is how society used to think of you as a black person back in the day. This was history. But yeah, that's pretty much all I can really say about the Censored 11.
Watching these, even about 10 years ago when I first encountered a few of them, I'm like, some of these are, like, even if you took out the imagery, some of them aren't even that good. Like Jungle Jitters is probably the worst, I would think, or at least right up there as being the worst.
Yeah, I would say if you had to give me the worst one, it's Jungle Jitters and Angel Puss.
Oof,
are probably the two. They're the two worst Central 11 cartoons, and two of the worst Warner Brothers shorts ever made. And again, like you said, not just because of the imagery, but just they suck. They're
Yeah.
not that good. I could say one good thing about Angel Puss is that some of the animation, that not the character design, but whatever, like some of it looks, in that mid 40s Jones animation, like it's interesting to look at. And for some of these I would say for all of them, I would love to see them restored, especially ones like Coal Black and the Seven Dwarfs, or Would Sunday Go to Meeting Time, because I forgot to mention it in my commentary, but man, they were really like, hey, we got 3-strip Technicolor, time to go
Yay.
nuts. And it would be interesting just to see how it looks from an artistic standpoint. But yeah, that's about it. Like,
Oh, exactly right, but I do totally agree with you. It's Jungle Jitters and Angel Puss. In case people were wondering, yes, those are my absolute least favorites out of the bunch. And yeah, as much as the second Clampett short that was a cheetah cartoon, it still had some great parts to it. It was still at least enjoyable from other standpoint. But yeah, it's just hard to watch. I mean, just doing all these all in a row, because originally I was thinking, do I also want to include some of the other really bad ones that are not on the list? And I do answer in the initial video why those aren't on the list, because I keep getting asked that question all the time. How come Buddy in Africa isn't on the list, or Going to Heaven on a Mule, which is. Yeah, I can't wait to revisit that one. And you're not out of the gates. You're not off the hook on that one. You have to do about the song in that. It's a Merry Melodies.
Yeah.
And that's the only good part in the whole thing. Like, that one song section when they're actually singing the title song, which actually sounds really nice, to be honest. And Keith Scott's wonderful book actually goes through, I think, who sings that, which would be nice to, delve into. Because I remember doing the commentary for that one. Originally, I was so shocked that when I listened back to it, I failed to realize I didn't really offer too much by way of facts, and it wasn't good. I thought I need to offer at least something of substance. But it was a learning experience. I had to start somewhere. I don't know if you listened to my original track for that one. I was like,
yeah, I did. I heard the track for it. It's 6 minutes of you groaning and hemming and hawing, and I know, like, with some people, they might say, oh, we want more of the facts and we want more of trivia and whatever. And I mean, obviously, yeah, that's one of the reasons why, when I first discovered your videos back in 2020, I was like, oh, I like this stuff. But, with some cartoons, not everything's going to be great. Not everything's going to be What's Opera Doc or Porky Pig's Feet or Baseball Bugs. There's a fair amount of stinkers in this. There's 1,000 Warner Brothers, shorts were made. And, we can sing the praises of the Hunters trilogy and Porky and Wacky Land for as much as we want. But you also, you have to take the good with the bad. And that's one of the things that I know what keeps drawing me back in to this hobby, of not only researching Warner Brothers cartoons, but with other things that I enjoy pop culture wise. It's fascinating, to gush into the stuff that sucks, and you could pick apart and see why it's not good, and you could expand upon it and work on things that will improve it in the future. I mean, I know from my experiences as a musician, like I've performed with ensembles that were phenomenal. I've performed with some that are awful. I've sung music that just you feel the energy of the audience, and just it captures people on a different level. And just some stuff is like, ugh, like this is makes you feel like your teeth are rotting.
Jeez, I just got that visual in my head. It's like, roar.
Now I'm thinking of Ren and Stimpy with the
Yeah.
episode with the nerve. Oh God,
Yeah.
why was I watching that as a kid? But that's I mean, I do love Ren and Stimpy, but yeah,
that's another video for another time.
Yes, it is.
If you guys want us to cover Ren and Stimpy, we can definitely do that, because I've been meaning to revisit it actually. But I don't know how we got to Ren and Stimpy from Censored 11, but it is what it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
I got a lot of nerve bringing that up. See,
ooh,
hi-oh.
Oh, that's right. But one of the things I did answer in the initial video I did for Censored 11 was, the question, are these worth watching? And I do mention, okay, it depends on you as the viewer and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, to me, there is still a lot of interesting stuff in these. Like the first two Tex Avery ones, for example, I think I actually forgot to mention this in that video, because I did those videos afterwards. But the two Tex Avery ones are interesting because the first one, the Uncle Tom's Bungalow one, that one had a huge impact on how Tex Avery would approach his material from then on, with the whole crazy narrator, like a fractured fairy tale type situation, because you got Egghead, the Cinderella Egghead one. I forgot what it's called.
Cinderella Meets Fella.
Yeah. So
and that's a good. Like that. I really like that cartoon.
Yeah,
especially yeah.
So if you compare the Uncle Tom's Bungalow to that, there's a lot of similarities in that it's like a fairy tale-esque sort of thing, and that's something that Tex would do, even over at MGM, when he would do like a Red Riding Hood parodies and all sorts of stuff.
You got to start somewhere.
Exactly, and the other one, with the Isle of Pinga Ponga, which is a copyrighted cartoon, and I hope some people are listening to that, which it's a little in joke I'm not going to get into, but it is a copyright, and I have the blocked video to prove it. It is copyrighted, okay? All right, so it's not in the public domain, okay? Anyway, that one is very interesting, because that one is also the first of the many travelogue or spot gag cartoons that Tex would do. It's just a shame that that's the first one, and there's a lot to love about that one. But so I'm actually very surprised that one could have been cut to like 5 minutes, like Africa Squeaks was, but alas, they chose not to. So it is what it is. I mean, what do you think of those Tex ones? I mean, the last one's a bit all this rabbit stew, but anyway, that's another one.
For the Avery ones, I mean, Uncle Tom's Bungalow. I mean, there's little bits and pieces that I enjoy. I love the dogs. Whenever they talk, just having whenever Mel Blanc did that low voice, always cracks me up. I would like to see it restored because I just want to see how the colors look.
Mm.
The rest of the short, I'm like, man, but I never really thought about it yet until you just mentioned it, how it was the beginning of Tex messing around with familiar stories. Like you said, like a fractured fairy tale, so to speak. And I never, that was actually very interesting that you said that. Never thought of it from that perspective. Isle of Pingo Pongo, there's some funny jokes in there. Again, I'd love to see how it would look like restored. I mean, we've been spoiled lately with some of the restorations that have been showing up on like HBO Max and
Me TV.
and Me TV. Like like I'm thinking of like the quality of the Isle of Pingo Pongo and how bad it looks. And I can only imagine it restored. Like two that pop in my head that I saw all the time as a kid was Robin Hood Makes Good and Gold Rush Days, and how recently they got restored. And I'm like, it's like seeing something completely brand new. And you can only imagine what Warner's has in their archives with all this in Rabbit Stew. There's some really really good jokes in there. Like I always but if only it was Elmer Fudd, or if only it was Willoughby the dog, or whatever character, like, and I grew up with that one. That was the first Censored 11 cartoon I ever saw, was All This in Rabbit 2.
Mm.
It's one of the first, I always tell people, like, there was a period of my life where I saw Warner Brothers cartoons, on ABC, on the Bugs Bunny Show, Nickelodeon, on the Turner networks, and on public domain videotapes. And with All This in Rabbit Stew, like it's burned in my brain because it was one of those cartoons I remembered vividly before I got into this hobby. I always say 2001 was when I started, when I went online and bought all the books and whatnot. But it's crucial too because it is early Bugs Bunny. You can't deny it. It's in there with a wild hare and the heckling hare and Hiawatha's rabbit hunt and Elmer's pet rabbit. Like, it's critical to the history of the evolution of the character. It's not like, oh, it's just some random Bob McKimson cartoon from the late 50s, or Shishka Bugs, whatever. It's like, it's critical to the evolution of the character. But it's and again, there's just some, like, to this day, the scene where the bear and the hunter and Bugs are like, trying to escape from each other, and they emerge from the hole and they go, whew. The sound effect when they look at each other and they realize who it is, that wah, it sounds like a car horn, gets me every freaking time I hear it. And you also hear the same sound effect in Wabbit Twubble, which was started by Tex Avery and finished by Clampett. And, you know, you would love to see it restored, but, and we could, it's in the public domain. But just but the fact that it's associated with the most famous Warner Brothers character, it's just like it has more of a target upon it.
Exactly. It's an interesting one as well because there was no Alma versus Bugs formula that solidified. Yes, Avery did the first one, Wild Hare, and then you had Chuck Jones one as well. But it was never written in stone.
Yeah.
So, and my theory,
I think it's the 6 Bugs short in total. If off the top of my head.
Yeah, because you also had the Hiawatha one.
And Tortoise Beats Hare.
Yeah. So you had Bugs being paired up with all different protagonists. And my guess is the theater owners wanted something like a Wild Hare, and I have a sneaky suspicion. This is pure theory here that Tex was tasked to make another Hunter versus Bugs one, and Tex is the kind of person, he doesn't like to repeat himself. So my guess is that he just didn't want to use Alma, and he just wanted to do this other, quote unquote funny character, which is Tex's raccoon. Take away a few letters, as you said in the other video. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it literally says those words, sadly to say, but it is what it is. So at least the Avery ones are interesting. Chuck Jones one, as you mentioned, Angel Puss is the worst one. That one's just very morbid, very.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. Morbid. I mean, I was bored a few days ago, as I am often. No, I'm kidding. But like, I was writing down a list of like my personal favorite Warner Brothers shorts. Maybe one day I'll do a video about it. But and it was actually near Halloween, And one of my absolute favorite Warner Brothers cartoons, and I've probably said it before, is The Case of the Stuttering Pig. And I enjoy, I'm not a horror fan. I'm not a fan of like creepy, scary stuff. But I've always been fascinated by that short. And it nails, the creepy atmosphere. I know that I think it was probably Blue, High Blue, that he's like the expert on horror from that time period. But it was like parodying horror films from the 1930s, and it works. And like a scary set, like or I'm thinking ahead, the commentary that we did for Bye Bye Bluebeard. It's a morbid short. It's creepy. It's weird, but it works. Case of the Stuttering Pig, morbid. It works. One of the best Warner Brothers shorts that's coming soon, Chowhound.
Oh
Morbid
yeah.
as all hell, but it works.
Yep.
And then you have Angel Puss, and it just completely fails at it.
Exactly. And even if you replace the boy with, just your standard, I suppose, white bread sort of character, like an innocent looking child. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I'd argue it would be probably even worse, because if you have a cutesy child and that be made to do a really horrific thing, it would probably be worse. It's the whole story just falls flat. And the biggest irony, though, is how that same writer ends up doing Buckaroo Bugs, which is one of the best, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, I
So
love Buckaroo
how
Bugs.
does that work out? I don't know, but it's probably just a writer mismatch,
Well,
sort of thing.
and he also, if I'm not mistaken, Lou Lilly, yeah, he did Angel Puss. He did Hair Ribbon, if I'm not mistaken. And I
Yes.
believe, if here, I'll even pull it up right now. But he did Russian Rhapsody, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just before the cartoon nerds will scream at me. Yeah, Lou Lilly, he wrote Russian Rhapsody. Oh, yeah, I'm looking at Angel Puss, Horton Hatches the Egg. I know it's from Wikipedia. I'm being lazy searching, but one in particular, Drafty Daffy. That's a great short. So
Yeah. So it's probably
of
just
course,
one of those.
it just didn't work. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Because but Chuck Jones will do a lot better in terms of Morbid, as you mentioned. Chad is a good one, and Hubie and Birdie, the later Hubie and Birdies, like
yeah.
when
Or
they
Fresh
psychologically,
Airedale.
where they psychologically torture a cat.
Yeah.
That works. But this
Mm-hmm.
one, no. And come on, even if you don't like cats, I mean, I love cats, but even if you don't like cats, I mean, come on, how can you enjoy a cartoon with a cat being drowned? If you enjoy that, then you got problems. I mean, I'm not even a dog person, but I don't want to see dogs tortured. You know what I mean? It's like,
Oof. I was like,
but
be
true.
careful. I was like, be careful how you word that, or I'll get my cute little fluffy dog to
Yeah,
bark at you.
exactly. Like I said, I mean, I'm not. I personally, I know this is a bit of an aside. The reason I don't own a dog is I just don't have time for a dog. I mean, I love dogs, but I just don't have the time, and to be quite frank, the patience to have one. But I don't want to see a dog being tortured. Like, even if you were replaced in this cartoon, instead of a cat being drowned, a dog trying to be drowned, and the dog tormented this character, I'd have the exact same reaction. Believe me,
Yeah.
I mean, when did this video become me appealing to the people? I don't want animals tortured.
Now that we're talking about this whole subject, and hopefully this will be the last time we talk about cats or dogs drowning, but there's is it Heavenly Puss from
Yeah,
Tom and Jerry in
yes,
1947? And
49.
that scene, 49, sorry. And the nerds are gonna get me. I hope someone got fired for that blunder.
We're probably
Me.
both wrong, but anyway, I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
it's 49, but,
Go ahead, nerds, go nuts. Well, we're nerds too, or geeks or whatever.
we're all
But
nerds.
like the scene where you see the kitten, these adorable kittens, like, and they come out of a bag, and you see like water dripping off of
You
them,
hear
and
the
it's like,
water.
yeah, and it's like make the realization, you're like, oh my god, and you feel like, oh, and just like pairing that with just how adorable those kittens look on the screen.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Hanna-Barbera, why? Why did you do that?
Even Disney, sorry to say, but even Disney, there was the Pluto one that won an Academy Award where, yeah, he saves a drowning kitten, but then the Pluto gets jealous of the kitten that once Mickey Mouse starts looking after him. So, it's unfortunately just, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to get into more discussion on animals drowning, but
No more about
it's sadly
yeah.
it's sadly a staple, just like unfortunately racism in cartoons, but also things like whale hunting. You had stuff like that in the 30s. That was a big thing because a lot of townships would have they use whale oil for the the oil to power up the gas lights and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, that's another thing entirely. So in other words, there's a lot of crazy stuff in these cartoons that will not be acceptable today. Can you imagine the new Looney Tunes, that the latest show, which I think is now officially finished, where they're like going out whale hunting now or something? Just
yeah.
You're
about 50, 60 years too late on that one, fellas.
Yeah, sorry. You'll have to do another draft of that to make it more acceptable. Fine, we'll just do regular old fishing. I think that's acceptable. But anyway,
yeah.
But out of the directors on the Censored 11, it's quite clear that the biggest standout, and not in a good reason, is Frizz. Frizz Freeling, and it's so frustrating because I love Frizz Freeling's work.
Same.
I love his work. Great timing. His Bugs and his Semi Sam shorts are fantastic, and he's done so much great work. And then you see all this stuff, and you're like, why does he come across as the most uncaring, for lack of a better word, over the other directors when it came to representation of African Americans and even African natives? But then again, I don't think he was willfully racist or anything. I think it was just about as racist as just about everyone else was at the time. Just they didn't know any better. That's how I guess rationalize the whole damn thing. But aside from Angel Puss, so I mean, you were on the videos for Sunday Go Meantime and Clean Pastures, and you were even on the commentary, and you completely forgot for Goldilocks and the Jiving Bears.
Oh yeah, well I probably took it out of my mind because that's when I was brand new to working with you and my audio quality sucked. I think that's why I'm just trying to get out of my brain.
No, but that was good though, because we're discussing about how it's interesting how you had in the 30s, you had the slow rise of the jazz, even though, as you point out, Clean Pastures is not quite represented well. It's just supposedly sounds like the artists they were portraying, but they really weren't if you knew more about what they actually did.
Yeah.
But then by the time 1944 hits and you had the Goldilocks and Jiving Bears, jazz and black music was a lot more accepted, and then of course a lot of it would be appropriated, and then you end up with rock and roll and then Elvis Presley and blah blah blah. That's. Am I right, by the way? Because you're Mr. Music. I'm just.
No, I mean that sounds about right. And actually, you just reminded me of something I forgot to mention in the commentary that I did for Clean Pastures. I mean, the guys that performed, the Basin Street Boys and the Plantation Choir and the performers who were imitating, the jazz greats. Like, I love vocally, I love what they're doing. I love what the arrangements that Carl Stalling did. I mean, the work is incredible. That's why I love, like everybody's like, oh yeah, like. I was talking to someone a few days ago, and like they didn't know how crazy I am with Warner Brothers shorts, and I was saying that I have such an affinity for the pre-48 package, and this is including both the quote unquote sunset cartoons as well as the AAP package, because look, there's plenty of great cartoons from the late 40s and 50s and some to the 60s. I mean, my favorite Warner Brothers short is What's Opera Doc from the late 50s. But just the music that was featured in the Merry Melodies, especially from the mid 30s until the late 30s, it's so rich. The orchestra sounds so amazing, and I love it, and I just eat it up. But like going back to what I was saying with Clean Pastures, I'm like, and also Sunday Go to meeting time when Norman Spencer was a musical director, the things that they were doing, the arrangements, and the fact that they were scoring with an orchestra like that. I mean, it was not very common then, and it's almost never now. Like, I know The Simpsons has been scored with an orchestra since the beginning of the show, but it just makes it sound so interesting from a sonic level. No, not you, Blue, not that Sonic. But then you get into the whole issue of the appropriation of the music, or the fact that they didn't source, actual examples of, of music that, how do I say it? Like having the music that would actually be representative of the artists that were in that cartoon. Or I'm in here was a point I was trying to make originally. Duh, it only took me 15 years. Cab Calloway did animation. He did it with Fleischer Studios. He did Minnie the Moocher. He did Snow White for Fleischer in the early 30s. What's your excuse? That's, he was willing to do it. And I mean, the scenes of Cab Calloway working on Minnie the Moocher and Snow White are still popular and relevant to this day, and people recognize the greatness of his musicality, and he was an incredible musician, and he's still influential to this day. But I'm like, why couldn't you guys make the effort of doing that as well? I'm saying you guys as in like Norman Spencer and Carl Stalling, and you gotta, I don't put this cartoon on a pedestal like some other people do, but you got to give some credit to Clampett. I know I'm jumping around a bit for what he was doing with Coal Black and the Seven Dwarfs, how he was trying to pay homage to black music and jazz artists at that time period. The execution wasn't perfect, but I guess you could say the good intentions were there, but you know, you can argue whether or not the execution was 100% spot on. And I mean, it still goes. This is still an issue that is dealt with still to this day in music and in animation in movies where like for example when Encanto came out last year, and I'm not. I have friends that are from Colombia. They have relatives from Colombia, and they were saying like how authentic the music of that film was to Colombian culture. Or like I have a friend of mine who is an artist, and they're like the patterns of the dresses and the architecture, they did their homework. That
Yeah,
I guess
it's a
is the
great
easiest
film.
way of saying they did their homework. And I mean, some people, from what I heard, objected to the fact that Lin Manuel Miranda, who's like myself, a Puerto Rico, he and I were both born in the States, but we have family from Puerto Rico. But he was writing the music when some people probably would argue should have been a Colombian artist or someone who was Colombian American to do it. But I mean, he still made the effort of collaborating with Colombian artists. And I forgot the name of the woman who did the score for the film. And same thing, she did her homework, she did the research, she made herself familiar with cumbia and other styles of Colombian music and infused it into the score. And just those things, for the most part, weren't really spoken about or been made aware of at the time period. I mean, it would have been great if Carl Stalling, asked, or Norman Spencer, asked, black musicians or to collaborate with them in the composition process, whatever. But it was just like, hey, I got to bang out this score. I only have so much time to do it. Okay, cool. This is going to be a cartoon with black characters. Let me fall back to the old standards. Let me do a little Sweet Georgia Brown. Let me do a little bit of Swanee River, whatever. And I mentioned it in the video for Clean Pastures, and I think I also mentioned it in the one for Hitting the Trail that that by that period the cliches were already in effect, for, oh, these are black characters. We're going to play these minstrel songs. We're going to play, Camptown Races. We're going to play Old Folks at Home. Or on a more lighthearted, reason, like I always tell people, I'll play a little bit of the Toccata and Fugue in D minor by Bach, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And people are like, ooh, vampires and Nosferatu and whatever. I'm like, this music has nothing to do with vampires. It was composed in the 1700s by Bach, and he didn't know that when films were, being accompanied, 150, about 200 years after he composed that, he didn't know that people would say, oh, this sounds creepy. Maybe I should play this in the theater organ while you see a vampire or a scary monster on screen, and how the original meaning of the piece of music, shifted over time. Did I have a point somewhere? I probably did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know toccata in fugue is basically just music terminology. That piece of music doesn't even have a proper name.
Yeah, it's
Like,
just you nailed it. It's literally that's a toccata and fugue. It's the musical terminology. D minor, that's a key he's playing in.
yeah,
Whatever.
exactly.
But
I think
people, it's like, ooh, scary music, or uh, I'm thinking of again Halloween related, but in the Hall of the Mountain King, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and how it was originally written for a play, and the music was composed by Edvard Grieg, and this is in the 1800s, and it's music associated with a play, with a production of Peer Gynt was the name of the play, and there's other pieces of music from Peer Gynt that you're familiar with, but whenever there's like morning or the dawn. But now, like, I remember hearing, in the Hall of the Mountain King as a kid in a commercial for Ritz crackers, and it's like how the meaning of the music has shifted based on what it was
Exactly.
originally supposed to be done.
Exactly, but I think the point you were trying to make before was how by this,
I had a point.
by that point, I know exactly. By that point, sorry, there was already the stock music that they were just using for every situation imaginable, because it's a lot quicker. It's no different than today when you have certain TV shows. Like, can you imagine working on a show like Bold and the Beautiful? As awful, it's awful. But I'm talking about from a musical point of view, like a soap opera. I mean, I see it as akin to that, where they will just have their stock songs, if you will, that they will fall back on the stock themes, and they would have the quote unquote, black music. Like the big one, of course, is Congo, which I actually adore. I like that song. The great beat and rhythm, it's fantastic. But what is he always used for? We're in the jungle folks.
Yeah,
always.
I said it, before you recorded. Congo, which off the top of my head was composed by M.K. Jerome. My favorite rendition of that song is from Africa Squeaks in the beginning of the cartoon when Porky is in the jungle with the natives, and just that, I don't. His book is over there somewhere, Keith Scott's book, and I was like, oh, let me go grab and read it. But like the vocal ensemble that did that performance, I'm like, oh my god, harmonically, and it sounds great, and it's just these were just phenomenal singers. And then you look at the screen, and it's like, oh, yeah.
Oh, exactly right. And that's another one that I forgot to mention. Like, people ask me, why wasn't this put in the Censored 11? Well, different packages, which I explained in the other video. I won't get into at the moment. And it's a shame. That one is actually, I think, quite funny. And it's also notable for having an actual radio presenter, Kay Kaiser, in there. But again, as you pointed out, you're swinging back to what you're saying. Why didn't they get Cab Calloway in Clean Pastures? I mean, you'd love to think that they at least asked him, and maybe he couldn't do it because maybe he was touring somewhere. But yeah, this sort of thing's lost to time, sadly. But
yep, give him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, that makes sense. But now that you say that, hey, Cab, are you willing to do it? But Clampett was, I think, about 7 years younger than Fritz Freeling, and based on what I've read and whatever. Freeland, I don't want to say he's a curmudgeon, but he was definitely like, he was the senior director. He was the elder of the studio, the senior director, and he wouldn't be as hip or as, with it like Clampett was, because, that's, 7 years isn't huge, but, this is what, 1930, Fritz Freeland was born 1906. So yeah, 1936, he was already 30 years old, and Clamp is what, 23, 24 years old. I'm 34. And if I talk to someone who's 27, 26, sometimes, depending on who it is, I'm like, are we in the same planet? Like, it's just a completely different, or me talking to people in their early 20s, I'm like, was I that dumb when I was that age? But then again, you probably have someone in their 50s looking at me and like, oh, this kid doesn't know what he's talking about. So that could be another idea of thinking about it, where Freeling was just more, let me just get this done, and I have an idea of the music and whatever, where Clampett's like, let me be a little bit more. Let me actually get the people on board who are doing it. But that's not to say that what Freeling did in Clean Pastures, in Goldilocks and the Jiving Bears, and with Sunday Go to Meeting Time, because there are some sections there musically of those three, not Jungle Jitters, Get Away, but those three that I really like. And it's another example of just how great Freeling was when it came to timing his excuse me 1 second. Here, Nina, you want to talk about the Censored 11?
There we go.
Yeah, I think she's not a fan. Oh, thank you. I think she's not a fan of the Censored 11 either. But yeah, there's some moments where it's like, yeah, you could see how brilliant he was at musical timing, but just could have been with a better short, right, Nina?
Oh, exactly. But see, I like the Goldilocks one. I was actually surprised when I revisited that one. I actually was surprised how much I actually enjoyed the music, and it even becomes kind of droopy-esque in a sense, because the wolf is like, he wants to stop dancing, but He's still being made to dance. That one actually is not bad. I thought out of the Censored 11, that one is definitely one of the more watchable ones. But but as you said about the two Clampett ones, I have my issues with the second one, the cheetah cartoon, and that. But again, the music's nice. I like that. But Cold Black is put on the pedestal, and as I mentioned in the review, my biggest issue with that one is that one should have been a time capsule short, but instead it's just dated because of the World War II references. I think it should have been just a straightforward black version of Snow White, but I digress. I mean, I think that the war stuff, it really hurts it, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's sorry, but it's kind of like with like some of the other cartoons from that time period. Like I'm thinking in particular one like Commando Daffy, and like there's some good gags in there, but it's so steeped in World War II jokes, and I mean the ending itself, for God's sake, when Daffy hits Adolf Hitler in the head with the mallet. I mean, great. If it were only that simple in real life to get rid of him like that way, but it's harder to access it because not only you have the baggage of it being filled with all these racial stereotypes, but then you also have to deal with the World War II jokes and some of the jokes, not just for African Americans, but like some of the jokes in particular, like in the whole Murder Inc. scene when the van pulls up and it's like what it says on the side, and I'm like, I understand we were in the middle of a war, and these were the enemy, but yeah, it definitely doesn't make it hold up pretty well to this day.
No, well, yeah, that's probably my major issue with it. I mean, a lot of people love it because of the music and, of course, the whole rhythmic dialogue in the whole thing, which is very catchy. I got to say, I thought it was, really, really nice. But then, yeah, the war stuff just really just doesn't work for me at all. It just dates it so badly, But anyway, that's just. I know I have an unpopular opinion on it because some people call it an unqualified masterpiece. And hey, if that's what you think, fantastic, But
I mean, I agree with you on that. Like, I could see why so many people think highly of it. I mean, some of the work that the Clampett unit was doing, and Rod, especially with like what Rod Scribner was doing, like it's from an animation standpoint, it's so interesting to look at. But
especially the kiss at the end.
We're on the same page. Yeah, we're on the same page when it comes to that, where it's like you could recognize it for being, you could see why it's so well regarded, but I don't know. I don't get the hype.
Yeah,
I don't, and I never did.
But it's interesting. One thing that people do wonder is, okay, so of course these cartoons were banned, but then you still had other cartoons like you had Inky still going on, and I can tell you here in Australia, I was seeing Inky cartoons as far as into the late 90s. So they were still around. They did remove some of the blackface gags, but of course we also still had Asian gags around. We still had the Native American gags, and that part's probably the most interesting, the Native American stuff. Because as late as the early 2010s, I was still seeing Native American stuff being shown. And even on home video, like the Looney Tunes Superstar set, they're kind of notorious for many reasons, but the Porky Pig set has wagon heels on it, and you can just only imagine a few years later they would not have released a restored version of wagon heels. So a lot has changed in the past 5 years.
Yeah, tell me about it. I mean, you see it from the from the perspective of being an Australian. Imagine how it is here in the United States.
Yeah, I can only imagine. It's just absolutely crazy.
It was definitely an interesting experience. I mean, I've seen every single Censored 11 cartoon before. I first saw, I would say the majority. I mean, the first one I saw ever was All This in Rabbit Stew as a little kid, not realizing the imagery, what I was seeing as a kid was, I had no idea. But I know, like, when I first got into this hobby, and I mentioned, I think in the commentary where I said that Thad Komorowski sent me a videotape. Remember videotapes, kids? How do you do, fellow kids?
Video?
Yeah, and And I think on that tape was like Clean Pastures and Uncle Tom's Bungalow and Hitting the Trail for Hallelujah Land. And again, I was seeing these when I was a teenager. And now with all the knowledge that I've accumulated over the years, and just with everything that's been going on in the world, and just learn, and I would say you cannot talk about the subject without talking about the reckoning that was happening, especially throughout the world, but especially in the United States in 2020, not just with COVID, but with the whole incident with George Floyd, and how it really brought a lot of awareness and reckoning to a lot of these pervasive issues that we've had in this country in regards to the treatment of Black people. And just seeing these shorts now, because it's been a while since I've seen a good amount of the Censored 11, but just to see them now, especially after a post George Floyd world, just adds another layer to the complexity of the experience of seeing these cartoons. I'm really trying my best, like, to word this in an appropriate and respectful way, because you never know how the comment section is going to be whenever this topic is brought up. But
you always get that one person
yeah,
that says, "Oh, these are just cartoons."
yeah, and it's just, I mean, you could also go into the whole thing when it talks about representation, and not just for representation for Black people and for Latinos, but for other disenfranchised groups and other minorities, and how you're going to always deal with that debate of like, oh, this is pandering, or oh, this is just shoving stuff down our throat, and yada and I'm trying to make this easier on you to edit, but you just have to keep in mind that there are positive images and there are negative images about anything you can think of, any group, anything, and some people don't realize the power of imagery, not only in a positive sense, but just also in a negative sense. And for being around negative images for so many years, and then to see something that is the complete opposite, that's positive, since it's so unfamiliar, so brand new, that it just causes the what was it, a cognitive dissonance. It's like you don't know how to process it. And it's I I'm of the camp where I would love to see these cartoons. I know they've been restored. The Warner Archive was going to do the release, and they had the screening in 2010 of most of the Censored 11. There were 3 that weren't shown. But from the perspective of an animation historian, I mean, sorry, I'm not an animation historian. I'm not an animation historian. Huh. But for someone who's an enthusiast on the subject, and someone who's been studying the history of these Warner Brothers shorts for so long, that I would love to see them, like, I would love to see the entire Warner Brothers cartoon library restored. But you just have to keep in mind just the presentation and the nuance. And I know, what was it, like a year ago, 2 years ago, the whole controversy on Warner Media, or not Warner Media, HBO Max, with the release of Gone with the Wind, which I still haven't seen the entire film. Some people say you're not missing out on much. Some people say watch it because it is an important film. I will eventually. And I do know that we did talk about it briefly in one of my classes in grad school, because we were talking about the score that was written for the film. But I mean, obviously this is something that you're not going to put on the $5 rack at Walmart for little Johnny and Susie to watch. And with going back with Gone with the Wind, like, I appreciated the fact that they had a film historian going on talking about it, that they showed like a panel of people talking about the impact that the film had. And I'm like, I would love to see these cartoons released, like in physical media, in that way, where it's done with the proper historical context. Like, treat it like something you would see in a museum. Don't treat it as like, a typical Bugs and Daffy or Sylvester and Tweety cartoon. But at the same time, I'm not someone. I mean, I feel uncomfortable watching these, and I don't like I said, I already feel uncomfortable watching them as it is, and I'm not even African American myself. And for me to say like, "Hey, let's put these out," when I know that it's the impact that it's had on the negative impact that it has on African Americans. Like, who am I to say that, oh, we want to release it for the historical aspect of it. It's this is, gosh, look at that, talking about nuance and conflicting and things being in shades of gray as opposed to black and white. Wow, look at that nuance discussion. Ain't that a thing?
Yeah, oh, exactly right.
It's the fact that I can't think of like a good way of saying, well, the fact that I'm just rambling at this point, but just like the fact that there is no clear-cut answer. I mean, for me, that just makes it worthy of discussion and worthy of just trying to tackle it. I mean, if this were something like, oh, this is just nonsense or like nothing redeemable. I mean, I'm not saying these cartoons are redeemable, they're not. But I mean, there are things about them that we can talk about, the artistry and the musicality and the fact that it is a learning tool. It is definitely a learning tool. And I don't know, maybe one day we'll see them in a proper official release, obviously done properly, or we may never get to see them. I mean, we have the access to see them, but
yeah, so it's not lost media as
oh, good, yeah,
I hate that term, lost media.
same.
Like how it's being just abused in certain ways.
Yeah.
Lost media is not media that you can't find online. If it exists, it is not lost. It's just not online.
Here's my term: inaccessible media.
That's it.
That's what I use.
That's better.
Inaccessible media. I wrote that online a few months ago, and I'm sticking with it. The
Yep.
film exists. The nitrate films or the negatives and all that. They exist somewhere in California or who knows what. We do know that these films have been restored, but they're inaccessible to the general public.
Exactly right.
If the nitrate film burned to a crisp, that's a different story.
But even then, it's not lost because you would still have copies of the interpositives around. You'd still have
exactly
people having 60mm copies around. So it's not lost. Lost is the original ending for Orson Welles' The Magnificent Ambersons, his second feature film. That's lost. Unless someone finds it in someone's attic. But
You mean like this? I just found it. It's a kid's classic Popeye public domain tape from 1989. It's
beautiful.
It's right here. Look at it. It's a relic of the past.
The past. But yeah, I just hate that meme. But anyway, we'll wind it up here. Look, thank you all for watching. This is the last I'm going to discuss about the Censored 11. I think I've said my piece. You've said your piece. Everyone has. I want to do one complete thing. So if anyone asks about it in the future, it's like, refer to this. I'm moving on. I want to finish 1950. So that'll do it for this one. Thanks for watching. And until next time, take care.
That's all, folks.